I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. On this report, we're going to take a look at some bowl betting tips, some do's and don'ts for the bowl postseason, and quite frankly, there are as many don'ts as there are do's, arguably more, because I do hear a lot of convoluted logic when it comes to postseason betting. Now, the bowls are much like March Madness. One of our golden rules is you've got to use the dictionary as a handicapping tool, and what we mean by that is as much as any handicapper, well, not really quite as much because there are some handicappers and sports services that overplay it, but we do use splits as they're known in baseball or in basketball and football home-road dichotomy where we compare the home statistics to the road statistics. But a big mistake is that people think that a neutral game means it's a road game for both teams. That is absolutely positively not the case. Over the years, I've been listening to players' own comments, the coaches' comments, as well as, of course, most importantly, doing my own research. And a home game is just that. When somebody talks about a home field or a home court advantage, it is exactly as they state. It is more of something that buoys the home team than it is that it rattles the road team. So a neutral game is no more a road game than it is a home game. Now, one of the things that we do consider is regional field advantage. Even if a team is not playing on their own home field, certainly if they're playing within 200 miles of their campus and the other team is playing maybe 500 miles or more away from their campus, it would definitely be a regional advantage, certainly if a team's playing in their home state. They're going to have a little bit more of a crowd. They're going to have their family in the stands. They're going to have a lot more alumni for the most part. So yes, if a team is playing close to home and another team isn't playing close to home, we do weigh that accordingly, where it is not a complete home field advantage for one team, but it is certainly not a true neutral game. Now, another thing that we like to look at as far as motivational facts, one thing is quite clear. Nobody disagrees when it comes to the so-called minor bowls, motivation. It might be a consolation bowl for some. It may be a big game for the other team. One of the great indicators of that is the actual ticket sales. If one team sells out their allotment, not only that, but we love it when we read such and such team sold out their allotment within 24 hours. Now, you might say, let's just say, each team was allotted 10,000 tickets. And one team sold out just before game time, the other team within 24 hours. Well, 10,000 equals 10,000, you may say. True, but from a motivational standpoint, when we read that one team sold out their ticket allotment very quickly, what that means is it's very important to the school, and there's almost never a disconnect where it's extremely important to the fans of one school, but not important to their players. Super big myth. Long layoffs. I don't know how many times I hear square players, and only a square player would say this, I like to go with the team that goes into the postseason hottest. I like to fade teams that skid into the postseason. Could not be more incorrect. Rest benefits the teams that need the rest the most, and it hurts the teams that are taken out of a groove. For the most part, those teams that are playing the worst football of the year, they're the teams that use the time off to make the adjustments. Teams that are playing their best football at the end of the year. They're the teams that don't need the rest. They want to get back on the field. They don't want to be taken out of the groove. Now, these are general angles. Of course, you have to analyze each and every game. Maybe one team slumped at the end of the year because they had a bunch of injuries. Perhaps during the 2, 3, 4 weeks off, they're getting those players back. Maybe another team played well at the end of the year because they got a player back that was maybe hurt at the beginning of the year. He came back, or one of the cases where we would actually go with the team that went in the postseason hotter is if they went in the postseason hotter because maybe a couple sophomores really exploded at the end of the year, and that's why they were playing better. It is most important to ask why a team skidded at the end of the year or why they are playing better, but more times than not, teams that go into the postseason playing poorly, they're the ones that will actually benefit from the time off. In particular, we really like the non-traditional powers, kind of the number 3 and 4 team, 5 team from the SEC, lesser extent to the Big 12, and there was slightly lesser extent to the Pac-10, but these teams generally wear down at the end of the year. They don't have as much depth as the big boys in Alabama and Auburn and Texas. Well, now, this is an evergreen broadcast that we're doing, it would have applied 5 years ago. Chances are most of the stuff that we say will apply 5 years from now. We record this in 2010, where Texas is actually off of a bad year. But what we're saying is the cream of the crop teams at the top of the SEC, or the Big 12, or the Pac-10 especially, one of the reasons they have a lot more depth. The teams that are number 4 and 5 teams from the Power Conferences, they have less depth. They wear down, especially if we're talking about those teams from the Deep South where they're playing in that brutal heat. Again, they will benefit from the time off. The reason we say the non-traditional powers, because if you're talking about a school like a Florida or a Texas, Oklahoma, they're coming off of an off year. They're not playing in a BCS game. They're not even playing in a major bowl game. They're the teams that we usually fade because it's going to be a kissing their sister game for them. It's going to be a consolation game. Now, keep in mind that there is no clear-cut consolation game, not consolation. Every single angle has to be weighed accordingly. There's still to this day a certain amount of prestige because of the tradition in playing in a New Year's Day bowl game. So even if it's traditional power playing in a New Year's Day bowl game, you kind of got to weigh it. They may not be quite as motivated, of course, as they would be if they were playing in a big game, but it's not the same as playing in, a game on December the 27th, which is, for the most part, truly a minor game. There is no real etched-in-stone type golden rules in handicapping. Now, again, the general bubble burst teams, any team that entering maybe the last 2 games of the year had a legitimate chance at winning the national championship, and then they lose a game, especially if it's the last game of the year. They're usually the bubble burst teams. One of the worst bowl picks I ever made was a couple years ago. What was it, 2008? I went with Alabama against Utah. That was just a bad pick. The truth is, Alabama was the perfect example of a bubble burst team, a team playing in a consolation game. Don't overuse conference angles. Time and time again, I hear people say something like, I originally was going to go with Texas A&M, but so far the Big 12 is 0-3. I'm not so sure the Big 12 is quite what it was. Wow, maybe the Big East was better than I thought. They're 3-0. Look, 3-4 games as we go deeper into the bowls. It's not statistically significant. Not to mention, you don't use one game to handicap the next. I'm not saying that there aren't certain things you can find out as far as a team's strength of schedule, etc. There are minor adjustments we make, but there might be a specific reason that the teams went a conference is 0-3 so far. Maybe they're playing better teams. Maybe one team just came out flat. Maybe that team had a couple conferences playing in the consolation bowl games, and that angle doesn't apply to this game. So be careful. Be careful for over-analyzing conference records to date in the bowls once we get into the deeper bowls. I'm not saying you completely ignore that. But again, if you want the best sports picks in the world during the bowls and after the bowls in any sport, it's offshoreinsiders.com.